Welcome to Newsmax.com's Newsmaker Forum. Today we have a very special guest with us, Larry Patterson. Larry, of course, is no stranger to headlines. For 6 years, he guarded Governor Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary. He was a member of the elite state police unit that protected the governor. Since Bill Clinton became president, numerous allegations have surfaced about the governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, and activities he engaged in. Several troopers, including Larry Patterson, have come forward. Larry Patterson recently retired from the state police after 32 and a half years on the job. He retired in July of 1999. He had a very distinguished career, received commendations during his career. There's never been a black mark on his record. For 7 years, he was a member of Highway Patrol in Arkansas. He was promoted to the Chief Public Information Officer for the state police, held that position for 16 years. For 6 years, he was a member, in fact, the most senior in terms of seniority, member of the governor's bodyguard troop. And in the past 2 years, he has served in the governor's highway patrol unit, in the state police highway patrol unit. And of course, Larry, you're no stranger to me either. We've known each other for several years. And one of the things I think that I appreciate about you is that you've never embellished a story. Your stories about what happened under Bill Clinton have never changed, which is usually a mark that they are not being embellished. A lot of people have criticized you. Major media, Geraldo, our good friend Geraldo, is always saying, you sleazebag state troopers. And the fact is, despite all their blustering about you and the other state troopers that came forward, they've never proven anything you said to be a lie. They'll say you're part of a vast right-wing conspiracy, you're a Clinton hater, that you're out for cash and money, and in fact, we'll find out today that you turned down promises and offers to keep quiet because you believed in what you were saying and in the importance of what you were saying. And the idea that I think we both agree is that the American people should be informed about these issues. I'd like, Larry, you to reflect back, if you could. Here you guarded Bill Clinton for 6 years, day in and day out. You were close with him and his family. Bill didn't really have any close family members. He had a half-brother, Roger.
Correct.
I don't think he was particularly close with Roger, but he was pretty intimate in sharing his thoughts, ideas of the world with some of the state troopers. Almost consider them like brothers. And reflecting back, how would you describe that 6 years plus that you worked there with Bill Clinton?
Chris, he told me one time, he said, Larry, I can't have close friends. He said, if I get involved with my family or with close friends, they always end up asking me for something or wanting me to do something. So therefore, I can't do that. I can't get involved with people.
So he stayed away from people, but because you were there every day, you became a buddy of his, so to speak.
That is correct. We worked 2 16-hour shifts and an 8-hour shift, Chris. So we would get there at 6:30 in the morning, and we would get him out of bed in the morning. If we had an 8 o'clock meeting or a 7 o'clock meeting, or if we were going out of town, we got all the luggage, we got everything prepared for the day's trip, and we spent 15, 16 hours. And if we were going out of town, we'd spend overnight. We'd put him to bed, and then it would be an hour or so later before we could get to bed because we were making preparations for the next day events. So, we put him to bed and literally put him to bed and got him up. And
well, you were literally around him 24 hours a day. In some ways, you were more familiar and intimate with him in some ways than Hillary, because you were with him all day long. She was at work or other meetings.
Right. We were closer to him than any of the staff members, and spent more time, literally, like you said, with him than Hillary did.
As you look back, Clinton has gone through so much scandal, the most recent one being Monica Gate, but start with Whitewater, Filegate, and Travelgate, and all of these scandals. Does it surprise you that he's gotten away with all of this through the years, that he's been able to, he seems to skate every time No one ever catches him?
Yeah, that's amazing to me, Chris. That during the campaign, and if I can I go back a little?
Oh, let's wherever you want to go. We'll take this.
And we were always waiting for the other shoe to fall. There was 11 guys in governor's security. We had a pool going, Chris. Well, after the Jennifer Flowers thing broke, what day the other women would start coming forward, and as he put it, the second shoe fall. I never expected him to weather the storms. He has weathered them, and the American people seem to be more accepting. Whatever Clinton does now, they accept it. And I don't understand that.
Well, part of it is the media seems to have accepted it. They seem to have turned their guns on people like you that have come forward.
They've blasted Larry Patterson, Roger Perry. So they, like you said, they've accused us of everything. They have proven nothing. And I just retired. Roger Perry's still working. So if
you had done anything wrong, you would have been removed from the state police. And much of what you said, you've given in testimony in one shape or another.
In deposition,
under oath,
under deposition. So if I'd told one lie, Chris, see, I would have been held to a higher standard than our president was, because he lied under oath.
Right, he admitted
and had to admit that he lied under oath. But as a law enforcement officer, if I had done that, then I would have lost my job. Then I would have been prosecuted, and I would have probably, in all probability, spent some time in jail. So yeah, I don't understand how he has done this, and why that the American people just keep on accepting what this man, whatever he tells us.
Well, you decided at a certain point to go against him. You were friendly with him. He would have thought you were one of his best pals, probably back before a certain point in 1992 or 93, probably in 93 after he was inaugurated. Either you approached the press or some members of the press approached you and other troopers. Maybe you can just set the scene for us a little bit, what happens, and then why you decided to speak out against Bill Clinton.
Okay, Chris. During the campaign, on my answering machine at home, when I got off my shift, I would have most days a minimum of 7 and 8, and a lot of times as many as 10 and 15 messages from the news media to please call, because the news media had been in Little Rock for all of these months. When he declared his candidacy, they came in. There was literally 8 to 10 cameras at the back gate of the governor's mansion every minute of every day. All of these people came into town. They heard all of these stories about Bill Clinton and about his extramarital affairs. So they were hounding us. My personnel file was FOI'd by the news media. I think the last count was like 40-something times. So, they were calling us, trying to get us to...
They were digging for dirt.
Digging for dirt. The reason...
But you didn't speak out during that campaign.
No. Bit my tongue. But after this man was sworn in as the president, Roger Perry, Ronnie Anderson, and Danny Ferguson and myself sat down and we said, guys, this is not right. Something, we need to do something. So Roger Perry made the contacts of a former director of the Arkansas State Police and a former FBI agent named Lynn Davis, and that's the way it got started. There was 2 news media people that they decided would be the best sources for us to get our stories out. That was being David Brock with the American Spectator and Bill Rimple with the Los Angeles Times.
Did you feel that Bill Clinton was going to be elected in 92?
No, there was no way. We all made jokes about it. We made jokes to him about it, Chris, that,
he had too much to hide.
Yeah, that, what are you going to do? And, when all these people start coming forward. And Roger Perry stood in front of our office and told him, he said, Gov, Gary Hart, it took one woman to bring him down. What's going to happen to you? And he said, I don't know. He said, and he told me, Chris, he said, Larry, unless they've got pictures of me with a goat, I'll deny it.
And I don't think we have any pictures of that yet.
True.
But you obviously had these meetings with the troopers, and then Lynn Davis, who was the former head of the state police, a very reputable individual, I understand. He was also an FBI agent.
Correct.
And you must have had a reason for wanting to go forward.
Well,
now, your critics would say you wanted money, and we need to address that issue up front. But
sure.
But your reasoning, because why don't you explain that?
Well, that the American people had a right to know, what kind of man was not only the leader of our country, but the leader of the free world, and that this is a man, Chris, that could be having the biggest crisis in his life, and it took a gesture or a couple of words to completely turn him around. And this is not the kind of man that you want leading your,
It wasn't about sex, is what you're saying. It's about his whole moral authority, about how he did his abuse of power.
Power and abuse of people. Chris, we would see through all of these campaigns, and this man had just gone through the first 4-year campaign for the governor's office. The constitutional officers that had just been changed from 2-year terms to 4-year terms. We'd see these people, Chris, who would literally quit their jobs, take money out of their savings and put into his political campaigns. And when the campaign was, and work 10, 12, 14 hours a day. And when the campaign was over with, they would call to talk to him, and you'd buzz him inside the house and say, Governor, so-and-so is on the phone. And he'd say, I don't want to talk to that stupid SOB.
In other words, the nice guy, biting his lower lip, aw shucks individual that we see, the country boy, that's not the real Bill Clinton.
That's not the real Bill Clinton. What we saw, Chris, and what upset me so much was that he used people like an old pair of shoes. When he had got all of the good he could get out of them, they could not help him anymore, then he discarded them. He didn't want anything else to do with them. And that upset me. That's not the way that my parents taught me, that.
Well, one of the interesting stories I read, apparently Clinton had been at the funeral of a state police officer who died in the line of action, and he left that, and he said some very shocking things, and maybe you have knowledge directly of that or not.
I was not present. I was told by another state policeman. There was 2 state policemen that was present with Bill Clinton when this.
Who were those 2?
That was L.D. Brown and Bobby Walker, and he made and this was a black state policeman who had been killed in the line of duty by a survivalist, and there was quite a large gathering, and he made that it was just a GD MF cop that had been.
Well, you can say it quite candidly and frankly, whatever language he used, use it here.
Well,
don't worry about
Chris,
it. This is not going on the public airwaves.
But that's still very difficult for me to do. I was born and reared in the South, and it's just, But yeah, he made this statement that what was all the big fuss about it was just a goddamn cop that had been killed.
Motherfucking.
Yeah, cop that had been killed.
But I understood he used the word pig.
And if my memory serves me corrected, which I believe it does, Chris, that he put the word pig in there, and he was brought to task. One of the troopers with him told him, said, that is not right, and what you're saying is not right. And he immediately apologized for his
Well,
his actions.
It seems that this is a frequent, his dislike of the military authority figures, police.
Yeah.
He's not sympathetic to traditional law enforcement.
That is very true. He is not sympathetic to law enforcement, and we saw that in the 12 years that he was governor of our state, Chris. It was very apparent that he was not sympathetic, to especially to law enforcement. He had very little to do with the.
He essentially, and I think this is what came out of the American Spectator and the Los Angeles Times pieces in 1993. He essentially used you fellows as pimps. You weren't bodyguards, you were pimps. And that, I think maybe that got lost in the story. The American Spectator story was very lurid in its sexual detail. And allegations have surfaced that you received money for that interview. Describe maybe the situation, and I think give your side of the story, which we never hear on national television, of how that came about.
Chris, because Roger Perry and I both lost money in doing this, the American Spectator arranged for a gentleman to donate some money to help us offset the cost of losing our job. So yes, there was a few $1,000s that was distributed between Roger Perry and myself and the two attorneys.
I see. And you apparently lost income because of that. You were out of your part-time job for several years now, and Roger apparently lost his job.
That is correct.
People that supported Bill Clinton and or changed their story. Another state trooper who we won't name got a big position and doubled his normal salary. And
it's true. Yeah, and all these people that was in governor's security that that kept their mouth shut, the biggest percentage of those people have been promoted and have gone up in the ranks in the department. But that is not the case with Roger Perry and myself.
Well, Roger Perry, for instance, a senior police officer, how many years does he have on the job? 20 years?
Roger's got 27 or 28 years now.
And he was demoted from governor's security to...
The first thing they'd done to Roger when the story came out was they removed him from governor's security, put him in undercover narcotics, sent him to Southwest Arkansas to work a sting operation down there for over a year. He was away from his family, and his picture was plastered on every newspaper, every TV station, and they put him in an undercover job. So, but Roger worked that for a year, and then they transferred him out of that into highway patrols. He's now working midnight shift highway patrol in Little Rock.
Senior police officer, out alone in a squad car at night.
28-year veteran.
It's a message to all the other guys.
That's exactly what it was.
Now, Buddy Young was the chief of the security detail for Bill Clinton when Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas. He was later appointed to FEMA.
That is correct.
He was the regional director in Dallas. He was appointed in 1993. Before that, did Young, when these stories started trickling out, or the idea that, did Young come to you and express any concerns he had about you going public with this story?
Chris, on 3 occasions during the Camp 92 campaign, Buddy Young talked to me, and this is the gist of the the conversations. Larry, if you know what's good for you and good for your family, you'll keep all this to yourself. You won't go public with it, and you won't talk to anyone about it. But that was very, And
did you consider that a physical threat?
Oh, it certainly was a threat. Yeah. When someone tells you, Chris, if you know what's good for you and your family, you'll keep your mouth shut. Certainly, yes.
When the scandal really broke, actually, the story about Bill Clinton and some of his extramarital affairs breaks with Jennifer Flowers.
Correct.
Flowers had been a bit of an old story in Arkansas because Larry Nichols had come out in a lawsuit 2 years before the presidential campaign. So in 1990, he had in a suit against Bill Clinton alleged that Clinton had an affair with Flowers. At that time, she denied it. Did you have knowledge that she was having an affair with Bill Clinton?
On many occasions, Chris, I took Bill Clinton to the Quapaw Towers where Jennifer Flowers resided, sat in the car, waited for him hours on end to come out. On one occasion, the security guard came out and he told me, he said, "Sir, you can't park here. This is for residents only parking," and I had to move the car and wait on Clinton to come down. But if my memory serves me correct, Chris, probably 15, 25 times, something like that, I took Bill Clinton to Jennifer Flowers' apartment.
So his claims that he barely knew her, never had an intimate relationship, that doesn't wash with you. I mean, he has since admitted that he had a relationship, but he still downplays
yes,
significant.
One time, I think now is what he's admitting to. Chris, for this long period of time, we took calls from Jennifer Flowers. We made calls to Jennifer Flowers for Bill Clinton. 50, 75, 100 calls. She would call 3 and 4 and 5 times a day. Let me talk to Bill. And if Hillary was not there or not in the same room with him, he would take the call. If Hillary was in the same room with him, he would say, "Take a number and I'll call him back." Call them back.
Well, one of the things Flowers has said was Bill Clinton's fixation on having sex with her in some way that sort of was fooling Hillary. She said on Larry King's CNN show that on one occasion she had sex with Bill Clinton as he was standing in a window waving at his wife in the backyard of the mansion, the governor's mansion. That she was below the windowsill performing a sex act on him, and that he got such a thrill out of this. Does that sound like Bill Clinton to you?
He used this, yes, that sounds exactly like him, Chris. He used this term. You know, when he would do something that was really risky and and putting his career on the line, he would say it was living at the foot of the cross. And that sounds exactly like something Bill Clinton would do. He would have some woman in the governor's mansion, his own child there, all the staff people there. He would be up in the living quarters, and he would call us, and the only gate that we had open was the back gate into the mansion. It had an alarm on it. It had cameras on it. We had cameras on the back doors. So he would call us down at our guard shack, and he'd say, "Larry, when Hillary comes in the back gate, buzz me. I'm up in the study, I'm in the East Conference room, I'm up in the living quarters, I'm in the bedroom." So as soon as she came in, you would punch intercom, hit the numbers, Gov, Hillary's coming in the back gate. He's, "Oh, thanks. And he would immediately send the lady down. There was 2 sets of stairs going up into the living quarters. He'd send them down the back stairs now, the back of the mansion.
Well, sometimes he had relationships right in the bushes around the governor's mansion.
Yeah. Chris, I sat and watched this man have a sexual relations with a female on a 27-inch television, a monitor that we had on a pan-tilt camera in the back of the governor's mansion. That was common stuff. He would bring them onto the grounds. He would bring them into the house. We would go to people's houses and spend hours sitting in the driveway or out on the street waiting for this man, to come out and decide it was time to go home.
Well, everybody noticed that he was jogging so much, but he never seemed to be losing any weight. And that he was making frequent visits to the McDonald's downtown in Little Rock. And what was the real purpose of these jogging missions?
The purpose of the jogging was to get out of the governor's mansion, to go meet some woman. He would always either call from the kitchen, from, our office, then he would go out the back gate. 45 minutes, hour and a half later, he would call and say, "Come to pick me up at McDonald's." Chris, it's July, it's August in Arkansas, it's hot, it's 100 degrees. Even at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, it's 70, 80 degrees, the humidity's high. If you walk fast, you're going to sweat. Well, this man, you'd pick him up at McDonald's, you'd say, "Hey, Gov, how far'd you go today?" He'd say, "Oh, 5 miles, Larry, 5 miles. He would not have a drop of sweat on him. I said, "Yeah, sure, you run 5 miles. I believe that, He'd say, I can't hide anything from you guys." As we'd go back to the mansion, he'd have makeup, he'd have lipstick, and he'd have makeup on him, and you'd have to say, "Gov, you can't go in the house like this." He'd say, "Well, what's wrong?" I said, "Well, you got makeup on your shirt, or you got makeup on or lipstick on your face." And he'd say, "Oh, okay, yeah. I ran into someone in McDonald's, and so I hugged him, and I got makeup on him." I said, "Well, she must have hugged your shorts too." So we would have to,
occasionally he would take the water bottle, I'm told, and pour it over.
Or he'd come out to our office and he'd clean up and he'd splash water on himself. Then he'd go in the house
to give Hillary the impression he had been jogging and sweating.
That he'd been out running, yes.
So he was very active, we would say.
Chris, and I've had a lot of people say, "Well, this is hard to believe." If we were in town 5 days a week, 4 to 5 days a week, he would either meet someone in the morning, afternoon, or evening. Yes.
You've reached the end of side 1 of this cassette. Before listening to side 2, fast forward this side of the tape to the end.
Sometimes, if you fool around too much, I guess you get caught with your pants down. One time it's been alleged that Bill Clinton may have gotten into a little bit of trouble with a African-American woman in Little Rock named Bobby Ann Williams, known to be a call girl, a prostitute, drug addict. But she has alleged, some of her family members have alleged, Larry, that in the mid-1980s, she not only had sexual relations with Bill Clinton on more than one occasion, that she did cocaine with Bill Clinton, but that she also had Bill Clinton's child, a young boy, a little boy named Dano, or Danny Williams. This year, the Star magazine claimed they tested the DNA and there was no match, or they couldn't make a match. And it was widely discussed, or at least there was a subcurrent in the media about this story, and it seemed to fizzle after that. Can you shed any light for us on the Danny Williams story?
Okay, Chris, on at least one and maybe two occasions, Christmas Eve, we meaning the state police, governor, security personnel, delivered Christmas gifts to this house in Little Rock.
And to the house of Bobby
Ann Williams, the prostitute.
And this was on the orders of Governor Clinton?
This was on the orders of Bill Clinton, that we deliver these Christmas gifts to this residence. One other thing that makes me really, really suspicious, and I was not around when this supposed...
Well, let me interrupt here.
Okay.
The gifts, would Clinton go shopping for these gifts? Where would you get the gifts from?
Now, weeks before Christmas, all these hundreds of gifts would start coming into the mansion, and we would log them in, and the routine would be for the Clintons sometime in the morning of Christmas Eve to open all the gifts, and then the gifts that they did not want to keep, then some of those gifts they would wrap up and give to friends and family and acquaintances.
It's a good way to save Christmas money, huh?
Correct. But
so you mean some of the gifts that were given to Bobby Ann's son were maybe intended for Chelsea, but she didn't want them, or that she didn't know about them?
She didn't know about them, the Clintons, but they were wrapped up and given to other people, and some of those gifts we delivered to that residence.
So what makes you more suspicious than about this, that Dano may be the son of Bill Clinton?
Okay, the thing that makes me really suspicious about it, Chris, is when her house was burglarized in Little Rock, there was two pictures that were taken from the residence. This is a simple house burglary.
Let's go back over that. This is 1992, during the presidential campaign, when rumors started in a supermarket tabloid, The Globe, suggesting that Bill Clinton had fathered
this child.
In fact, this story later became the subplot for the major plot for the book Primary Colors.
Right.
So anyway, there was a burglary in 1992 at her house.
Two pictures were taken of this child. Those pictures appeared, or one of those pictures appeared in one of the tabloids. Little Rock police worked a case on this house burglary where these two pictures were taken. Buddy Young, who was a captain in the Arkansas State Police and in charge of governor's security, assisted the Little Rock City Police on a simple house burglary investigation. And the reason I know that is because I was working when this was going on, and he told me out of his own mouth that he was assisting the Little Rock City Police with this investigation.
Which is unheard of, really.
It's unheard of.
Obviously, Clinton was very concerned about this story.
Either Bill Clinton was, or someone in his, one of his cabinet members. Someone was, if it wasn't Bill Clinton, it was someone that worked for him that was very, very concerned about these pictures of this young man.
Well, in my mind, it's still an open question whether he's Clinton's child or not, because Star magazine said they compared the young man's, Dano's DNA evidence that they received from Dano himself to DNA material that was reported and identified in Kenneth Starr's report on the Lewinsky case, because remember, Clinton had to give DNA sample because of the dress and all of that. But I was told by DNA experts that the FBI did not reveal Clinton's DNA code. They just revealed the type of test they took, and there's no way any comparison could have been made. So this claim that somehow they were able to do a comparison is bogus. And so now your argument gives, again, legitimacy to this, that this story actually may have some legs.
I think it does have legs. And the thing that makes it legitimate to me, being a policeman, knowing how the Arkansas State Police works, how Little Rock Police Department works, Little Rock Police Department would not call on a captain of the Arkansas State Police to assist him in an investigation if there wasn't something there.
There again, you have an example. Clinton interfering in normal police processes to protect himself. or apparently seeking to do that. This, to me, is the issue. It's not whether he had sexual relations with this person or that person outside. That's ultimately an issue for him and his wife, and I think you agree with that.
Correct.
But there seems to be an abuse of power that went with this, including the use of yourselves. We mentioned before that you essentially became a pimp for him.
Abuse of power and abuse of people. And those are two separate things to me, Chris. They're two separate things altogether. Bill Clinton told me one time, he said, Larry, I'm the governor of the state of Arkansas. I work really hard, and the laws that apply to everyone else shouldn't apply to me. So he thought that he was above the law that you and I have to abide by.
Well, would you feel that an example of that was the Paula Jones case, where here a young state employee is brought into a hotel room? He allegedly dropped his pants. I don't think anyone doubts that this happened at this point, and asked her to quote-unquote kiss it, and then maybe made some suggestions. Is this something you think that would be, you obviously don't believe Clinton's claims on that.
Not only do I believe Paula Jones, at some point after this incident occurred, Chris, Bill Clinton and I, it was a spring day, we'd pulled up to our parking spot at the tunnel at the Capitol. Bill Clinton says, Larry, it's a pretty day, let's walk up the steps. So there's a series of steps walking up and going into the main doors of the Arkansas State Capitol and into the rotunda. And in there, Paula Jones was coming across that area of the state capitol. He called her by name, Paula, walked over, took her into a full embrace, and turned to me and looked and said, Larry, it's kind of like Beauty and the Beast, isn't it? So if Bill Clinton says that he does not know Paula Jones, and I believe that's what he said, that he does not remember her, I remember that incident. Within 24 hours of the incident happening in the Excelsior Hotel, Danny Ferguson told every member of Governor's security what had happened. The only difference in the story that Paula Jones told and the one that Danny Ferguson told all the other troopers on the detail was at the amount of time that Paula Jones spent in that room.
Well, Danny Ferguson, it's interesting, soon after Paula Jones comes out with her allegations in the winter of 1994, the spring of 1994, it started making headline news. Danny's ex-wife, Kathy Ferguson, a very beautiful young woman who was then living with another man at the time, a policeman, I think, in Sherwood, a suburb of Little Rock. She died, gunshot wound to the head.
Right.
A number of people found that to be suspicious. I spoke to people at the hospital she worked. She was a clerical person in one of the hospital wards. A doctor, Sam Houston, for instance, that worked with her, says that he believes she was murdered. And a number of people she told at the time that Paula Jones was telling the truth. She had spoken to her ex-husband, Danny, about this, and that, in fact, Clinton had harassed Kathy. And there was an incident that took place in the governor's mansion once where he actually accosted her, and that there was some interaction, very bizarre interaction, between Clinton and Trooper Ferguson in discussing sexual activities vis-a-vis his wife, Ferguson's wife. Can you shed some light on that?
Danny discussed this with Roger Perry and myself, and he said that Bill Clinton had told him that he wanted to know details about their sexual activity, about Kathy and Danny's, and that Bill Clinton was certainly interested in his wife and had told Danny that he was interested in her.
So the assumption being that Clinton, with his position in power, could maybe help Danny if there was some help.
Oh, certainly. But
so this is the type of thing we're talking about. It's an abuse of people, abuse of power.
That's right.
Larry Nichols, who used to be an aide-de-camp to Clinton, a fixer for him, and was appointed, in fact, as marketing director of the Arkansas Development Finance Authority by Bill Clinton.
Yes.
He said that Clinton was guilty of misappropriation of funds, used state funds to procure women, used the expense accounts. And then one of the troopers made allegations later in the American Spectator that Clinton would go to strip joints with state credit cards. Did you have any knowledge of this?
No, Chris, I have no knowledge of this. We do know that he gave women jobs who he was having affairs with. Jennifer Flowers went to work at the Employment Security Division office. 8, 9 other women that she was supervising. She had no experience whatsoever. She was hired in this position because Bill Clinton wanted her to have this job because he was having an affair with her. So that's abuse of power. That's abuse of state,
And apparently
funds.
there was an African-American woman that was supposed to get the job.
Correct.
That filed a grievance. And
Right.
one of the reasons that Clinton, in those tape recordings between Flowers and himself, was telling her to lie about the relationship, was telling Flowers to lie under oath in the grievance hearing involving the state employee in that position.
Correct. Yeah.
It seems like there's a fundamental, again, it's not a sexual issue as much as maybe a psychological issue. He has a difficult time telling the truth. You once said to me that he was a pathological liar. What do you mean by that?
If we went to 5 different groups in a day, he would tell every group exactly what they wanted to hear. And he would tell bizarre stories. And you would call him on it. We'd get back in the car and I'd say, Gov, what you just said, that's 180 degrees. And he'd say, Larry, had him right here, didn't I? You had him right in the palm of my hand. Could have done anything I wanted to with him.
So the important thing was getting that result rather than it didn't matter what the truth was.
It didn't matter what the truth was. It was to promote Bill Clinton. And he would tell bizarre stories. He would be late, and he was traditionally, 15 minutes to 45 minutes late to everything.
He'd hop in the car at the governor's mansion. You guys would be driving.
Yeah, and he'd tell us, run that traffic light. We got to go.
He would tell you to break through the traffic lights?
Certainly.
What about the speed limit?
Oh, we'd run 70, 80, 90. I've driven in downtown Little Rock as fast as 70 and 80 and 90 miles an hour.
Did he ever dare you to do those type of things?
Oh, he'd tell me, so-and-so got me to the airport the other day in 7 minutes. See how fast you can do it. Yeah.
So now let's set the stage. He goes to a meeting, let's say, in Jonesboro of senior citizens, and what might be something that
he'd say, I'm really sorry about being late, and I want to apologize. We had to stop and help this old lady that had a flat tire, or she ran out of gas, or her car was not, or it's not my fault, it's the trooper's fault because we're late.
Now he'd get a round of applause for helping this old lady.
Oh, yeah.
Did you help? Was that usually a true story?
That was not a true story. On occasions, we have stopped I remember one. We had been to Clarksville, Arkansas, and it was late at night, and we had left this. It was a residence we had been at for dinner, and there was probably 50, 60 people there, and we'd left, and it was very, very late, and we were coming back down Interstate 40, and there'd been an accident, and it was a group of hippies, and they were in this old Volkswagen van, and it had turned over, and so he was, just being the most helpful person in the world. And laying right out beside the road, Chris, there was a bale of marijuana that probably weighed 50, 60 pounds. And they were trying to cover it up, and it was very apparent what it was. So I just walked over and got behind him, and I said, we probably need to leave. And he said, no, we're going to stay and help these people there. I said, that is about 50, 60 pound bale of marijuana. Do you want to stay? And he said, oh no, let's go. So he didn't want to help those people anymore.
Or at least with you around.
With me, correct.
They seem to have an excuse now for some of Bill's problems. He was abused as a child. You knew Virginia Kelly, you knew his mother. Describe the relationship between Bill and the way the press played it, certainly during the campaign. Here was this young man raised primarily by his mother, loving mother. They loved each other dearly. He sorely missed his mother. Yeah. What was the truth about that relationship?
Well, they did not see each other that much. This lady had a mastectomy, a breast removed because of breast cancer. He didn't go to the hospital that day. The first time we saw Virginia, she was out of the hospital and came by the mansion to see him. So, it was...
Did they have a lot of communication by phone?
No, they did not. They did not. She was not a frequent guest at the mansion. Maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks she would come by. She did not spend a lot of time there. He did not spend a lot of time at her house at Hot Springs, which is, 50 or so miles south of Little Rock.
So how did you get the feeling they didn't really like each other.
Well, I didn't get the feeling I think they cared for each other. If there was a big rift, Chris, between and what caused this was Roger Clinton. When Roger got convicted on the cocaine charge, sometime after he got out of prison, Virginia came to the mansion, and there was a big disturbance between Virginia and Bill Clinton and Roger Clinton. It was yelling and screaming, and so there was a.
You don't know what exactly it was about.
I know what it was, that it involved Roger Clinton. I know that it involved that because he said that after his mother and Roger left, he came out to the office and it was very apparent that he was upset, and he mentioned that that had been the result of it. There had been a discussion over Roger.
I see. Did he always referred to his mother as Virginia?
As Virginia, always.
How did he treat Hillary?
Well, if they were together for more than 3 or 4 hours, it was, they were arguing, and it was very apparent, Chris, she always won all these arguments. She would, at the onset, they would banter back and forth, and then when it really got serious,
they enjoyed fighting and arguing with one another.
Yeah.
It seemed to be part of the routine.
Yeah,
there was something.
But when it got down, and after a few minutes of it, then she would really get real aggressive.
Would they do this in front of Chelsea?
Oh yes, it did not matter if Chelsea. He had done something. It was during a legislative session, and he had made some comment to the press, and it was headlines the next morning in the either Gazette or the Democrat. And so I had walked in the house and had walked through the foyer of the governor's mansion. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs. He was standing at the top of the stairs with Chelsea right beside him, and she was calling him everything that was imaginable, a GD, a goddamn stupid fucking fool.
Right.
Screaming it at the top of her lungs. And here's this little girl standing right there, beside her father, and she's listening to all this.
It's a funny story, isn't there, when Chelsea's at school once and she gets sick and she goes to the school nurse.
Yeah, and says, and the school nurse tells us this. She said, "Don't call my mother. She's busy. Call my dad." And we spent and Bill Clinton spent a lot of time with Chelsea. He spent 3 times more. He spent more time with Chelsea by triple than Hillary did. If Chelsea had any activities, and we were in town, we always went. We took her to school every morning. He spent a lot of time with Chelsea.
And Hillary.
Hillary was real standoffish. We'd see Hillary. She'd be out on a trip or working, and maybe for a week or two, and we'd come back in to the house, and she'd walk by, and was right behind Hillary, of course, with her luggage, and she'd pat Chelsea on the head like she was a puppy dog.
That's after being away for a week or two.
And Chelsea might be sitting at the bar in the kitchen, but yeah, she would pat her on the head.
Cold and detached.
Yes.
Let's get back to Roger Clinton. Of course, it's well known he had a very nasty cocaine habit, serious cocaine drug problem, and eventually went to prison for it. There have been criticisms and certainly allegations and rumors that George W. Bush has done cocaine, and that got big news. And there have been lots of stories that Bill Clinton used cocaine. Sally Perdue told the London Telegraph that he did cocaine. Jennifer Flowers indicated that she was offered cocaine. On a state police surveillance tape of Roger Clinton, he's quoted as saying that his brother, quote, had a nose like a Hoover vacuum cleaner. You guarded Clinton during a period of time, 6 years while he was governor there, not the whole, probably almost a little bit more than half of his time as governor of Arkansas. Did you ever suspect that he was on drugs?
I never saw him when I ever thought that he was under the influence of drugs. Looking back, Chris, Bill Clinton had some strange habits. He's the only man that I know that could go literally for a week or a week and a half on 1 or 1.5 hours sleep a night. bring him in after a 14, 15, 16-hour day, and he would be out in our office at 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the morning, and you'd have to say, "Governor, you have a 7 o'clock appointment. Get your butt in bed. Get in the house." But yeah, literally, he could. And reflecting now, Chris, yeah, I wonder about someone with that much energy and could stay awake for all of those hours. But I never saw the man.
Well, a couple of things. First, he always seemed to have a red face. I mean, was there any suspicion about that? And
well, yeah, and he said, he always said it was allergies and
affecting his sinuses.
Affecting his sinuses. So he took a large quantity of Sudafed. He would take a handful of Sudafed every day. Looking back,
but do you think he actually had allergies? And was he on medication for allergies?
He did not start taking the series of shots till in the campaign for the presidency in '92. Then he started taking allergy shots on a regular basis.
Or what they tell us are allergy shots.
That's what. Well, a nurse friend of mine came and gave him one of the shots, so I know that it was that was.
Oftentimes in drug personalities, you have rages, violent actions, violent behavior. Also, people that are sociopaths sometimes engage in that too. It doesn't mean they're necessarily on drugs, but how would you describe Clinton as someone who was potentially violent, or go into rages? And
what he would, he would go into rages. If things wasn't going right, Chris, then if whatever was close, he would throw or hit or break. We've seen him throw cell phones, throw apples, kick doors, break doors in the kitchen and the pantry. Yes. He would scream, yell.
And how did the troopers handle that when they were faced with that situation?
Well, this is a little bit embarrassing. This man, if he was having his worst day, Chris, all you had to do was mention something about a female or something sexual, and this man in 15 seconds was slapping you on the back and laughing and having a good time. And all the time I was single while I was on the detail, and so he was always asking me about my girlfriends and really personal stuff about what was happening in my life with my female friends.
So, in other words, if he's in a rage, you would say to him, "Hey, Gov,
I've got a new girlfriend."
And he would immediately...
He'd say, "Have you slept with her yet, Larry? What's she like? Tell me about her. Would she like me?" I said, "No, she likes guys. She don't like wimps and politicians."
But he certainly had what you said was a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality.
Yeah.
There have been serious allegations made that Bill Clinton has committed violence against women. There's a woman who was a former campaign supporter named Juanita Broderick, who's alleged that she was brutally raped. He even bit her lip in the sex act. Kathleen Willey has given details in the Oval Office that are shocking about the president coming on to her and actually physically trying to have sexual contact in one way or another, right in the Oval Office. Does this seem in keeping with the Bill Clinton you know?
When it comes to female in the sexual act, Chris, this man is obsessed. You cannot believe unless you was around him and see him in this, this man, it was 24 hours a day. If he saw an attractive lady, walking down the street, he would say, "Mary, what would you like to do to her?"
And oftentimes he sent you out to get these.
Oh, he would, yeah. If we were if he was at a meeting, Chris, and he saw some attractive lady, he would tell you, "Larry, the lady in the green dress, or the lady in the red dress, or the lady in the blue outfit, she has that come hither look. Go get her name and phone number for me." And I'd done that probably, 20 plus times.
And the other troopers did it?
Done the same. Sure they did. And then, and what we would see, Chris, in a short period of time, you would see these ladies showing up working at state jobs, or working in the campaign. So yeah.
became part of the whole system of things.
Yes.
Do you know of any incident where he may have beaten a woman when he was governor of Arkansas?
Now, I was called in and interviewed by our director, Colonel Tommy Goodwin, about a lady.
Director of the state police.
Arkansas State Police, the director.
When was this process?
This was probably in 1991, 1992, when this occurred. But he asked me, he said, do you have any knowledge, or did you take this lady to the governor's mansion or pick her up? And I said, no, I did not. I saw her at the governor's mansion. She was in the presence of Roger Clinton, and she had been a victim of a real serious assault, or she had been in a real bad car accident, or she had run into a door a number of times because she had big black eyes, bruises, knots on her head, and but she was in the presence of Roger Clinton.
In his car?
In his car.
At the governor's mansion? They
had driven in the back gate of the governor's mansion. I went out to see who it was, saw it was Roger, said, hello, Rog, how are you? And he said, fine. I said, ooh, are you all right, ma'am? She said, yeah. And I said, have you been in an accident, something? He said, well, this is a friend of mine. Her name is Denise Reeder, and she's been in an accident.
What was your suspicion based on your conversations with Goodwin?
Well, after I had the conversation with Goodwin, and I asked some questions at the time, and he said the allegation had been made by someone that either Carl Kirkland or myself had either picked this lady up at the governor's mansion and driven her back to the Capitol Hotel, or picked her up at the Capitol Hotel and driven her to the governor's mansion. I did neither of one of those.
I see.
But my only contact with her was when I saw her at the governor's mansion with Roger Clinton.
But asking you point blank, do you think Bill Clinton is capable of raping a woman?
Certainly I do. Certainly, no doubt about that, yeah.
Well, apparently there's no hard evidence Bill Clinton did cocaine himself, Larry. It's pretty clear that he knew people that did cocaine.
Oh, certainly.
Quite frequently. His own brother.
His brother.
Somehow his brother was able to keep it from him that he was doing all of this cocaine?
Well, I don't know, but he had a number of friends. Dan Laster, for one, who was convicted along with Roger. In fact, Roger Clinton was responsible for Dan Laster's conviction. And Dan Laster was not convicted of distributing cocaine.
Dan Lassiter was a friend of Bill Clinton's, was a financial wheeler dealer in Little Rock, a bond dealer. He had started as a young man in the Ponderosa steakhouses. Very successful, extremely bright, ambitious individual.
That is correct.
Who had somehow made a friendship, acquaintanceship. The way Bill Clinton tells it, he barely knew Dan Lassiter, and of course the press doesn't ask Clinton much about this. Well, like anything serious about Bill Clinton. But Dan Lassiter was a cocaine dealer, a cocaine distributor, a man that used cocaine. He apparently also had sex with underage girls. That was in the grand jury record when he was convicted.
Correct.
And maybe you could shed, again, some light for us on what the relationship was between Bill Clinton and Dan Lassiter.
Well, it was a close personal relationship, Chris. He worked in all the campaigns prior to his being, convicted on the recreational use of cocaine. But Dan Lassiter had access and to Bill Clinton. And
what type of access? Describe it.
Well, there was a 10, 12 people that anytime up until midnight, 1 o'clock, could have access to Bill Clinton. All they had to do was call and say, tell Bill I'm coming by, or get Bill on the phone. And those 10, 12 people, anytime, and you were told that anytime these people called, you put them through. So
Dan was one of them.
Dan Lassiter was one of those.
Could he go into the mansion anytime he wanted?
He had access. He could, if it was in reasonable hours, midnight or before midnight, yes, he could access the governor's mansion.
And Patsy Thomason, who was Dan Lassiter's executive assistant, was later brought to the White House and was put in charge of a number of positions there.
She was appointed to the Highway Commission by Bill Clinton. She was...
This was a woman that ran Lassiter's business while Lassiter was in federal prison for drug charges.
She had power of attorney for Dan Lassiter.
And then Clinton put her in charge of, among other things, White House security clearances.
Right.
as a law enforcement officer, separate yourself from your personal relationships and knowledge. Is this bothersome to you when you see the birds of a feather flock together? Or should we not make any verdict here of guilt by association?
No. If, not knowing any of these players, just being in law enforcement and looking at this, Chris, that would be, an immediate red flag that these are the people that you would not want in charge of White House security. Probably the second most secure building in Washington D.C. is the White House. Probably number one is the Pentagon. Number two is the White House. So but she's in charge of security and doing security clearances. That doesn't make sense.
And Lassiter, apparently, even after he went to jail, there was still a relationship with Clinton. Clinton later pardoned him for any state crime, so he could get a bond license again.
Right.
But then Clinton came to you and had an interesting conversation, I understand.
He told me, he said, Larry, I've got a really good friend that I would really like to appoint as chief of staff, but he's had some really, really bad problems, and I'm afraid if I do, it might hurt me politically. And he said he's had some problems with drugs, and I said, if that's the case, I think that would be political suicide.
So he was thinking about bringing Dan Lassiter in a major political position in his administration.
Correct.
This for a man who they later claimed they barely knew.
That they barely knew, right.
How convenient. It seems like Clinton also had other associations with organized crime figures in Arkansas. There is a man who we both know his name, we won't say it on this interview, who's reputed to be the head of the Dixie Mafia. Dixie Mafia, as I understand it, is the old boy network down there who used to run alcohol back in the old days of when there was dry counties and wet counties, just like out of one of those Burt Reynolds films.
And this, the Arkansas State Police has intelligence files that's unbelievably thick on all of these players and all of these people that are involved in the Dixie Mafia. And yes, this person we're talking about name is always at the top of the list.
Okay,
and
well, let's say his first name is Harry.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
but he was a contributor to the Clinton campaign. He sent a lot of Christmas gifts to the governor's mansion for the Clintons. So yes.
Anything special for Christmas?
A lot of liquor. A lot of liquor.
So Clinton had a personal relationship with him?
Yes.
Again, was this bothering to you as a law enforcement official?
Yes, it did. That upset me. That bothered me. But like we said, Chris, this man was just one of a few that.
Well, there have been many allegations made about Don Tyson of Tyson Chicken. There was a federal investigation of Tyson.
Right.
He admitted wrongdoing in some things related to Mike Espy. Mm-hmm. Clinton was close with Tyson. Describe that relationship.
Yeah, if I may, we had gone to Don Tyson's house in West Little Rock for he had a bunch of friends and he wanted Clinton to come to dinner, so we went to dinner at Don Tyson's house. And I happened to be sitting and he invited me to sit at the table, and I sat next to Don Tyson at the dinner table. Clinton sat down at the table 3 or 4 places. And then as the evening progressed, Don Tyson asked me, he said, Larry, do you like to fish? And I said, certainly I do. And he said, well, I've got a couple of boats just off the Baja in California. He said, I've got a 30-footer and I've got a 60-footer. He said, if you'd like to come out and go deep sea fishing, bill fishing, he said, call me. He said, the plane will pick you up here in Little Rock, fly you out there. You can fish a day, a week, however long you want to, and we'll fly you back whenever you're ready to come back. So I said, thanks, Don, I really appreciate that. So as we were leaving the residence, Bill Clinton was standing just outside the door. I was standing inside the door. Don Tyson was right beside me. And as we're getting ready to leave, he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, Larry, I really meant what I said about the fishing trip. let me know what you want to do. We get in the car and back out of the driveway and we're leaving, and he said, Clinton says to me, Larry, what was that all about? And I said, well, Don Tyson invited me to go fishing with him on the Baja. He said, well, let me explain something to you. He said, Don Tyson's a close personal friend of mine and one of my biggest contributors, but he said, there's a side of Don Tyson that you don't know about. And he said, if you'd done that, I'm afraid that you would be required to do some things that you would not want to do. I said, enough said. I don't need to go fishing.
One of Tyson's pilots for one of his company's planes alleged, and again, this was never substantiated, at least publicly and not substantiated, that Tyson made cash bribes to Bill Clinton, that the pilot would ferry down on the plane to Little Rock Airport wads of cash in envelopes, and then there would be state troopers at the Little Rock Airport to pick up the cash and deliver it to Clinton. Do you have any direct knowledge of these cash payments?
On 2 to 3 occasions, and maybe as many as 4, I picked up packages from the Tyson plane, from the Little Rock Airport, from Mid-Coast, and I did not open them. I do not know what the contents were. I was just told, Tyson's plane's coming in, Larry, go to the airport, pick up, there's some paperwork, there's some stuff that needs to be picked up. I would pick it up and deliver it back.
You were not the only trooper to have done this.
Oh no, there was many of the troopers on the detail done the same thing.
Did any of them indicate anything suspicious?
I never talked to them about it.
Right.
There has been some occasions, Chris, where I picked up envelopes were handed to me by Bill Clinton or by a contributor where there was money or in checks in those envelopes. Cash.
How much was the most you ever saw?
We were on a trip to Denver, Colorado, and we went to a number of receptions. There were 7 or 8 receptions that night. Each reception I was handed an envelope. One of those envelopes was open. There was a large amount of cash. There were several $100 bills in there. I'd say $2,000 to $3,000. There was a number of checks. Some of the checks as much as 30. I looked at some of those checks. They were made payable to Bill Clinton for as much as $35,000 each.
We focused a lot on Bill Clinton, but the really key person in this relationship, really it seems almost the driving force, is Hillary Clinton.
Correct. In the time I spent around them, Chris, I never saw this lady ever really enjoy herself. I never saw her let her hair down and just have a good time. She's the most driven person I have ever been around in my life.
More driven than he is?
Oh, certainly, yeah.
He's pretty driven.
Well,
2 hours of sleep a night?
Chris, but no, his was, no. Bill Clinton's was, which woman am I going to sleep with next? Or, what can these people do for me? She was the most focused person I've ever been around in my life. I think she wanted the presidency as much or more than Bill Clinton wanted it.
Did she have relationships outside her marriage? There have been rumors about this. A book was published suggesting she had an affair with Vince Foster, and I'd like to talk to him about him a little bit later in the conversation. But were there other relationships outside of her marriage?
Yes, the one with Vince Foster, I don't know about any other relationships other than this one, Chris, but there is no doubt in my mind that there was a long ongoing sexual relationship between Hillary Clinton and Vince Foster.
Anyone else other than Vince Foster that you know of?
Don't have any other knowledge of that. I personally saw Vince Foster put his hands on her breast, on her butt, look over at me, give me the high sign, and a big grin, and she did not protest. She did not move away from him. It was very apparent that those touches was welcomed.
The incident where he put his hands on her breast, where did this take place? When?
It was at her birthday party at Alouette's restaurant in West Little Rock. They had rented the restaurant that evening, and there was 30 or 40 people there, and she told me to sit in the bar. I couldn't sit with the dinner party. So I was sitting.
Good puppy.
True, yeah, heel. And so, so I was seated in the bar, and that's where the bathrooms were located, was in the bar area of the restaurant. So she was standing, and so Vince walked by to go to the men's room and put his hands on her breast, and then walked back by and grabbed her by the butt and looked over at me and gave me the old high sign and thumbs up. And
the other troopers told stories apparently of a relationship or meeting meetings, surreptitious meetings,
Yes.
away from home, meetings.
Yeah. And it was common practice when Bill Clinton left town that the first visitor to the governor's mansion would be Vince, or Hillary would be out the gate and out till very late hours of the evening.
You mentioned in a previous conversation that we had that Bill and Hillary Clinton also would frequently argue with one another using the worst expletives known to mankind at each other, sometimes in the presence of their daughter daughter Chelsea. And one of the comments you said was an epithet that they frequently use about Jews.
They used, and it was fairly common, for both of them to tell ethnic jokes and use ethnic slurs about.
What was the particular epithet they would use to each other?
A Jew motherfucker, a Jew bastard.
They would refer that to each other in the presence of troopers.
Oh yeah, that was quite common. And then,
why do you think they would do that? What was their?
I don't know.
Did they make other comments about Jews?
Bill Clinton was fascinated with Adolf Hitler, and
there's a couple of things going on here. They would make these clearly anti-Semitic epithets to one another.
Correct.
Right, put downs. And this was done over the course of 6 years. You heard it enough that you knew that it was fairly commonplace between the two of them. Did they exchange, did Bill have a lot of anti-Semitic humor?
A lot of jokes were made about the Jewish people. That was quite common for Jewish jokes to be told.
Hillary made them as well, or was Bill the joke?
It was mainly him, and he had a head full of trivia and jokes. Most of them with some sexual connotation, but he told a number of Jewish jokes.
It's interesting because in the Lewinsky tapes and transcripts, Lewinsky details to Linda Tripp that Clinton was telling some jokes about Jews. And Lewinsky, being Jewish, got a big kick out of it, and she gave him a joke about Jews. So apparently he's interested in Jewish humor, which for some people would be political suicide to go around and make jokes about not only Jews but any ethnic group.
True. But it just wasn't the Jewish community that he made jokes about, and he was, when it was convenient or he was upset at someone in the black community, he would use the N-word.
Yeah, well, you had mentioned that too, but let's go back over the anti-Semitism issue. One of the things that I've spoken to Roger Perry, the other trooper, about this as well, and he said, Clinton did have this interest in Adolf Hitler and the book Mein Kampf, and had said some praiseworthy things. And can you relate some of your discussions with Clinton on this?
Just that that he had read the book and that he was
Mein Kampf.
And he was very, very intrigued with the book and with the man.
What did he say about the man, Hitler?
Chris, that I just remember the conversation. I do not remember verbatim what it was, but that he was interested and had read the book, and he discussed it. That he had read it and that he was interested in this man, and that the man had so much power over these people, and that it had just been a short period of time since World War I where they'd been defeated, and this man had come forward, and he had rallied the German people, and that's the part that he was interested in.
I spoke to Perry, and Perry said that he recalled Clinton saying that he was a great man in the sense that he was a great man of history, and that he didn't say that he supported the Holocaust or any attacks on Jews, but that he saw this as some great political leader who had, as you said, rallied the Germans.
Yeah, that was my take on it, Chris. Is what I got out of the conversation, that he was fascinated about the way that this man could rally a nation, and so soon after a defeat in a world war.
He also, you mentioned, used the N-word. There was an incident during the 1992 campaign when he was first running for president. There was anger that Clinton had towards Jesse Jackson and felt that Jackson had backstabbed him.
Right.
And had not come through on a promise. And he was pretty angry, and he said to one or more of the troopers, some of his anger came out.
And this, he used the N-word. And he would also do it, not...
In other words, he called Jesse Jackson.
Right. And when we had political leaders in the state, black political leaders, and they, and he disagreed with them, then it was frequent that he would use the N-word.
He would use it in the meetings with the black men?
No. After he got out of the meetings, there was one man in Little Rock, Say McIntosh, who, printed all kinds of flyers about Bill Clinton, and there was a lot of confrontations between Say McIntosh.
Say McIntosh was one of the activists in the African American community in Little Rock.
Black activist in Little Rock.
He was angry with Clinton.
Right. So he would. Clinton would frequently use the after one of these confrontations at a public forum. Then after we got in the car, he would use the N-word.
How did that jibe with him being this liberal thinking individual? Seems real low class.
Well, that's Bill Clinton, Chris. That's the way he does. Everything is it's this man is so good at putting on this facade, this front, and then when you see the real man, and that's one of the things that really upset me, that when you see the real man, and you think this guy is, his public face and his private face are 180 degrees.
Even during the campaign, there seemed to be a little bit in the 92 campaign, a degree of paranoia by the Clintons. And, They were very, I understand, worried about the Secret Service.
True. Yeah, they would not let the Secret Service come into the governor's mansion. And they told us the reason for it is because they thought that the Bush people would have a plant in the Secret Service that would, tell the Bush people what all the Clintons' campaign was doing.
Or put wiretaps or bugs in the residence.
Yeah, they had the mansion swept on at least 3 occasions during the campaign.
They had people come into the governor's mansion to sweep for listening devices.
Check all the telephone lines.
Who was this, Hillary, you think, or Bill was the...
I don't know, but they were certainly paranoid about, anyone finding out about their campaign strategies, and so, yes, these people also swept the headquarters, but they come in to check for listening devices.
Delving into the area of little-known facts about Bill Clinton, I was a little bit astonished to hear in previous conversations from you about Bill Clinton's relationship with Ross Perot. And if you look in that 92 campaign, and to a lesser degree, the 96 campaign, Clinton did not win either election with a majority.
Correct.
And in fact, Perot was the margin that gave Clinton the victory over Bush in the 92 election. Now, as I remember what happened, Perot was set to come into the race. He announced he was going to run for president, and then sometime during the campaign season before the Democratic Convention, or during the Democratic Convention in the summer of 92, he announces he's withdrawing from the race. He even praised the Democratic Party being revitalized. Clinton, after the Democratic Convention in New York, something like 17 or 20 points ahead of Bush in the polls, came back to Little Rock. I was told he told somebody there that he needed to get Perot in the race, that it was going to tighten. Is there any evidence you have? Well, let's start. What was the relationship before 1992 between Bill Clinton and Ross Perot?
On several occasions, we would be in Dallas. We would have lunch, dinner with Ross Perot or with Ross Perot Jr. That happened on several occasions. There was a number of telephone calls that was made prior to the campaign between Bill Clinton and Ross Perot. Chris, the real interesting thing is after Ross Perot dropped out in that period of time, there was...
After the Democratic Convention.
Right.
And then Perot comes back in the race a month or two later.
Right. But in that interim period of time, there was probably no less than 10 to 15 calls that I made from the governor's mansion to Ross Perot for Bill Clinton, and received calls from Ross Perot to talk to Bill Clinton.
That's an awful lot of contact for two people that's supposed to be running against each other.
That is true.
And at the end of all of those conversations, you were not privy to what took place in those conversations.
Don't have any idea what took place. The only thing I know for a fact is that I made those calls to Ross Perot. I received those calls from Ross Perot.
And that Perot, we all know, did come back into that race in '92.
Correct.
And he didn't get a majority of votes, but he certainly had a significant number of votes.
Yeah.
About 10% of the vote.
True.
When you look at what Perot has done in '92 and '96, he's almost very quiet. There's long periods you never hear anything out of him or his army of volunteers until Bill Clinton needs him in an election. Are there any suspicions you have?
I don't have enough information. It seems strange to me, Chris, that that Mr. Perot and Bill Clinton had this close relationship, and that they're running for the same office. Yes, that strikes me quite strange.
During this the run-up to the election in '92, Clinton won, obviously, and did you feel immediately after that his personality had changed? Was he a different man? Was he treating you differently than other people now that he became president of the United States or president-elect?
He was, he all of his time, or the majority of his time, was taken up. We were still, receiving, up until he was elected, we still made all of his telephone calls, received all the incoming calls to the mansion. As soon as he was elected, they brought staff people in and started taking care of all the phones and installed another 8-10 lines. But up until that time, and even after he was elected, all the mail that came in, we checked all the mail, distributed it, opened all the mail. But the only change we saw is that Secret Service took him over full time, that most of his time was taken up. He had to really plan his sexual tryst then. He couldn't do it on the spur of the moment.
Obviously, they were getting more and more concerned after Clinton was inaugurated about you folks, the troopers, and what knowledge you had.
Yeah.
Were you ever directly offered a job or a position or cash by Buddy Young or any intermediary for Clinton?
Was told, the message was sent that if we would keep our mouth shut, that we could have whatever we wanted, either a U.S. Marshal's position, a FEMA director's job, a regional FEMA director's job, yes.
So the message was sent how?
Bill Clinton made the call to Danny Ferguson, and he told him, he said,
tell all the boys.
Tell the guys, if they'll just, stick with me, that whatever they want, they can have.
It didn't seem that things were going Clinton's way. You guys certainly didn't go his way that first year. He had the travel office scandal, the Waco disaster that's still dogging his administration, the health care fiasco that Hillary was trying to implement. And then, of course, there's the death of Vince Foster in July of 1993. He was Deputy White House Counsel, an intimate of certainly Hillary Clinton's, a boyhood friend of Bill Clinton's.
Yes.
He had been the personal attorney for the Clintons when he was governor. There was a lot of contact between, as you were pointing out, in the relationship between Hillary and Vince when they were in Little Rock together. Now they come to Washington, and I know you didn't know Vince Foster when he was in Washington, but you knew him for many years. Over those 6 years you were guarding Clinton.
Correct.
I mean, how he was a frequent visitor to the governor's mansion.
A frequent visitor to the governor's mansion, phone calls to all the social events. He was there. He would always come up, Chris, and he'd shake hands with you, and he'd say, "Larry, how are you? Is things going good for you?"
Describe him as a person.
A very outgoing, a really handsome man. He dressed well. He was always, his hair was always, combed. He was a nice looking man. Not only that, but he was or seemed to be a very caring man. He would always ask about your children. He would ask how things were going for you. He would always say, Larry, if you ever need me, call me, Yeah.
Did you think he was the type that would commit suicide?
No.
Were you surprised to learn that
I was, yeah.
or that was the official verdict of the police?
Chris, this man is at the pinnacle of his career.
Had a wife and 3 kids.
Wife, children, he's ready to really start enjoying life. He's the deputy counsel at the White House. He's been a full partner in Rose Law Firm. Everything's going his way. He's got no financial problems. He's got a position that probably every attorney in the world would love to have, right?
You don't believe he committed suicide?
No.
Are you concerned then that somebody so close to Bill Clinton you suspect may have been murdered? Does that bother you?
I'm very, very concerned knowing Vince Foster, but I didn't have. It just did not fit for this man to commit suicide. But yes, that concerns me to know that.
Does it concern your own safety? I mean, here you've been speaking out about, obviously if Foster was murdered, he was murdered for a reason. Somebody felt he was a threat. He certainly had a lot of intimate knowledge about the Clintons, and we know on the night of his death, various officials close to the Clintons, Bernie Nussbaum, Maggie Williams, Patsy Thomas, and Dan Laster's ex-employee were all in his office rifling through papers. It's been alleged by a Secret Service officer that they removed documents.
Yeah, that concerns me. And what concerns me even more, is that no one's had to answer for this, Chris. No one has had to answer for those documents being removed, rifling through the files, and all of those questions that are still unanswered.
Well, it seems to me that if no one's had to answer about Vince Foster, no one has to answer for any of the other scandals, FBI, Filegate, Travelgate, because if a key witness could be murdered, as you suggest, then why should anyone talk?
Yeah, that's not an incentive to talk, is it?
This presentation continues on the other side of this cassette.
How did you learn about Vince Foster's death on July 20th or the day after, or was there a news report?
Chris, in the early evening, afternoon of that day, I received a call from Roger Perry. And Roger was working at the governor's mansion. He had received a call from Helen Dickey, who was been working at the White House and had been nanny for Chelsea when they were at the governor's mansion.
And you knew who Helen Dickey was?
Yes.
She was an Arkansas girl.
Born and reared in Arkansas. Her mother had worked as administrator of the governor's mansion. Her father had been a close confidant of Clinton's at one time. But Helen called Roger and said that Vince Foster had been found in the parking lot of the White House and had shot himself. This is the way I was informed about the death of Vince Foster.
And what did Roger tell you?
That he had informed.
Gone out into a parking lot.
Yeah, that he had been found dead in the parking lot of the White House.
And that it was a suicide.
That it was a suicide. That's the story that Roger relayed to me.
And you learned that. Do you remember the exact time that you got this? This is on the day of Tuesday, July 20th, the day Foster supposedly killed himself.
Chris, I was working a 7:30 to 4:30 shift. I was working at the admin office of the Highway Patrol office of the Arkansas State Police. I had just got to my apartment. My apartment was 20 minutes from State Police headquarters. The latest it could have been, and using anything that could have happened to traffic accidents, something that would have delayed me, the latest it could have been would have been 5:30 Central Standard Time.
But you believe that it was approximately 5 p.m. Central Time.
That's correct.
Which would have been 6 p.m.
Correct. And Chris, I know that it could, that had to be the time frame.
Right.
I was walking into my apartment. The phone was ringing. I picked up the phone and said hello. I said, Larry, I said, yeah, Raj. He said, you're not going to believe this. He said, you're not going to believe this shit. I said, what is it, Raj? He said, just got a call from Helen Dickey. Vince Foster was found dead in the parking lot of the White House. Apparent suicide. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, no, man.
Well, it seems that you're making a very serious allegation by what you're saying here, which seems rather innocuous at the same time, because the White House claims they did not know about Vincent Foster's death until approximately 9 p.m. Bill Clinton says he was not notified of the death of Vince Foster until 10 p.m. when he got off of Larry King Live that night. He was doing a special program with Larry King on CNN. The Park Police have said that they didn't find Foster's body until about 6:15 Eastern Time, which would have been about 5:15 Central Time, which, based on your testimony, is after you got the phone call. And let me finish here. The Park Police said they did not notify the White House. They didn't even know who this man was when they found him for another hour or two, and that they didn't notify the White House until about 8:30. Or they didn't notify authorities who started the chain of command and notifying the Secret Service that notified White House officials. All of this is after 8 p.m. Arkansas time. So you clearly, somebody knew about this man's death.
Chris, don't you think it's rather strange that this time period that we're talking about, that no phone records can be found, that it was some kind of glitch, that no phone records can be
found at the White House,
at the
of Helen
White House,
Dickey's phones,
of Helen Dickey making the call back to the Arkansas governor's mansion to tell them that Vince Foster was dead. And don't you think it's strange too that in this same period of time when Jim Guy Tucker calls the White House back, Jim Guy Tucker being the governor of the state of Arkansas at the time, to confirm this, that those phone records cannot be found?
Or somebody doesn't want to find them.
That there's
because you realize, Larry, what the implications of what you're saying are. A, that there was a massive cover-up on this man's death, Vince Foster's death. B, that key White House officials lied about the death. And that C, the body was at the very least moved to that park from either the White House grounds or somewhere else, and probably was a murder.
But Chris, don't you think it's rather...
This is bigger than Watergate. This would be the biggest story in American history, what you're saying. Now, you've told this to investigators. You told it. One of the Senate investigators from the Banking Committee, the Whitewater Committee, came to you, and you had a conversation with him about this.
Yeah, we spent quite a period of time together on the interview, and they kept telling me, well, you probably stopped by the grocery store to buy groceries, didn't you?
This is the Senate investigator.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Now, the Senate investigator comes to you, as I understand, and makes some startling, says, we can't go into this.
They tell us, there's no records. We can't find any records. We don't know, they don't exist. They come up with all these different stories, Chris, that, well, if the telephone call was made from a certain floor at the White House, there's no records of that. If it's long distance, there's a record of it. I called a friend of mine who works for the telephone company for Southwestern Bell, does security for him, and I said, he said, no, that's not correct. He said, there is a record somewhere of this telephone call, and it can be retrieved.
The Senate Whitewater Committee had a hearing on this very matter, and they brought Helen Dickey before the committee. She testified that she never called Roger Perry to this effect. And the chief counsel for the Senate Whitewater Committee said that the troopers had made these claims but had refused to come before the committee to testify.
Never talked to them.
You and Roger Perry never
talked to anyone from this committee. Roger Perry and I talked to some FBI agents, but we did not talk to anyone from the Senate Investigating Committee
about testifying.
This man...
Did anyone from Senator D'Amato's committee come in and question you about this?
No. The only people we talked to was two FBI agents from the Star investigative body that came when he was given charge to look into this, that's the only people, Chris, that we ever spoke to, was FBI agents who came to interview us. And the FBI agent, I've still got his business card, that came to interview me, tried for an hour and 15 minutes to get me to change my story.
Well, first off, you now have a Senate committee hearing that's televised nationally on this matter, and they're claiming on the key point that you and Roger Perry were refusing to come. So first off, they never even told you they were having the hearing. This is a bold-faced lie. It's a lie.
It's a lie.
And then second, if you didn't want to come, they could have always issued a subpoena for you to show up.
That is correct.
And no subpoena was ever issued.
That's correct.
So the attempt here was apparently to try to put a rest to your allegation.
What they done, and what they said, former state policemen, former troopers, both still working. We were working at the time. They said we refused to come and testify. We were never asked to testify. We were never subpoenaed.
Nobody wants to apparently blow the lid on the most massive cover-up of the highest official to die since President Kennedy, Vincent Foster's death.
Correct.
Now, when the FBI comes, these allegations were made. They were investigating the case for Kenneth Starr. Kenneth Starr later concluded that Vince Foster committed suicide, just as the Park Police had said he committed suicide, just as Robert Fisk, the special counsel, had said he committed suicide, and that not only had he committed suicide, he had committed suicide in Fort Marcy Park, and that there was no cover-up. And he claimed that you folks were wrong in your allegations. Now, what did his investigators say to you when they met you?
This is what they said, Chris. They said, well, you had to stop at the store. You had to stop at the cleaners. We want you to go back and we want you to check all of your canceled checks on that date to see if you might have stopped at the cleaners, might have stopped at the grocery store, might have stopped for a beer, might have stopped to visit a friend. And I said, no. I did go back and check all of my checks. I had not written a check that day. I did not write a check 2 days prior to that or a day after that. So, but they were really, and he said, well, we want you to really be sure. And I said, wait a minute, guys, hold it. I'm telling you the truth. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to make up something. I said, I've been an investigator. I've been a policeman for as long or longer than both of you put together. And I'm not changing my story. That's what my story is. It has been this way. It will continue to be this way.
You are saying that the FBI agents working for Ken Starr tried to get you to change your story. Now, you're a trained police officer, and they were trying to get you to change your testimony or your account to them.
Not once, not twice, but 6 or 7 times. And they would ask me the same question 6, 7 different times or 6 or 7 different ways. And I said, wait a minute, guys, I've been an investigator. I've been a policeman for a long time. You can ask me 25 different ways. My answer is still the same.
And apparently they tried the same thing questioning Roger Perry, whose story is in sync with your story.
That is correct.
Again, is this bothersome that you have such an important issue? Or, do you get the sense that Bill Clinton is really running the federal government, maybe even running Ken Starr's investigation?
Well, I was real disappointed, I was interviewed a total, Chris, 5, 6 times by all these different investigators. They told me this out of their own mouth. They said, Larry, every time we interview someone, it's like a brand new chapter in a book. We develop all these new people and all these new leads. Well, I'm ready for Kenneth Starr to give us his report. These policemen, I believed, when they told me this, they said, we've got file cabinets, drawer after drawer of information, of interviews we've done. Well, if they had all that and there was, all that much wrongdoing, then something should have been done.
Well, the news reports indicate that on the specific issue of Whitewater, Starr is going to give Clinton maybe a wrist slapping, scolding, but that he will skate on that. There won't be any indictments on that. He pursued the sexual issue about Monica and perjury and all of that, which may or may not have been that important. But on the serious issues in Whitewater and some of the obstruction issues in the Vince Foster case, he's given them a pass.
Right.
Were you interviewed, for instance, about the Whitewater matter, about Clinton's involvement with David Hale and Jim McDougal?
Was interviewed on that, yes.
And what Clinton said, that he barely knew David Hale, if at all. And just like he said, he didn't know who Dan Lassiter was.
Right.
What was Clinton's relationship with David Hale? David Hale, of course, is one of the key figures who helped defraud the federal government for a loan scheme that he and Jim McDougal and Governor Tucker.
The only association I had with that was I was working. Bill Clinton came out of his office. He said, "Larry, we need to run an errand. We need to go to David Hale's office in North Little Rock." I said, "Governor, it's not on the daily schedule." I said, "I'll have to look up the address." He said, "I know where it's at. Let's go." So we got in the car. He gave me directions to North Little Rock to David Hale's office. We went in. He told me, he said, "You wait out here in the foyer to his office." I sat out there. Bill Clinton went in. They had a 30, 45-minute meeting. He came out. We left. That's the only knowledge I have of Bill Clinton being in direct contact with David Hale.
Do you say that if you met someone in their office for 40 minutes that you never really met them or knew them? And Clinton, of course, was friendly with Jim McDougal.
Sure.
He was frequently at Madison Guaranty Bank?
Sure. Yeah, it was, it's 6, 7, 8 blocks from the governor's mansion. It was right down the street. It's at 17th and Main, and the governor's mansion is at 1800 Center Street.
Susan McDougal, Jim's ex-wife and one of the Whitewater partners, stubbornly, steadfastly refused to cooperate with federal prosecutors from Starr's office. What was Bill Clinton's relationship with Susan McDougal?
I never saw Bill Clinton and Susan McDougal together. The only knowledge I have, Chris, is what the other people in government security told me of the activity between Susan McDougal and Bill Clinton, that Bill Clinton was a frequent visitor at the home and at Madison Guaranty when Jim McDougal was away. That's the only knowledge I have, and that was secondhand.
There's also been allegations, there have been a number of people around Bill Clinton that have died very suspiciously. Certainly that have died. Vince Foster, Ron Brown, the head of Clinton Gore's security for the 92 campaign offices, a guy named Jerry Luther Parks in Little Rock.
Right.
2 months after Vince Foster's death, he was gunned down on the streets of Little Rock. You knew Jerry Parks.
Correct. Jerry Parks had been a Forest city policeman, and so I had I'd known Jerry for a number of years. He had a lawsuit that he had filed against the city, and had received a settlement, and soon after that he left employment of the Forest City Police, moved to Little Rock, and put in the investigative or security company that he had when he was shot down at Chenault and Highway 10.
Do you have any idea why he may have been murdered?
I was given information by his son and by his wife that for a number of years that Jerry Parks had taken a number of pictures of Bill Clinton with various females around Little Rock, that he had a file that he had built on Bill Clinton, and that the house was burglarized, I believe, Chris, some 5 or 6, 7 weeks prior to his death, and this file was supposedly taken in the burglary. I was later told that there was a copy of this file that was in the Memphis FBI office, that his widow and his son told me that that the FBI in Memphis had a copy of this file that he had on Bill Clinton.
And you weren't surprised that it was over in Memphis?
No, see, Jerry Parks was a Forest City policeman. It's 30 miles from Memphis. So in his activity as a city policeman, any FBI contact that he had would have been with the West Memphis office instead of the Little Rock office, since it was closer. So if he had had any friends in the FBI, they would have been in the West Memphis office.
Do you think Clinton is capable of having someone ordered murdered?
Well, Chris, I hope that is not correct. I hope and pray that is not the case.
Well, there are all these lists that go around of people that have died suspiciously. I mean, some of them have dozens. Linda Tripp, for instance, in the Monica controversy, told the grand jury one of the reasons she taped Lewinsky was that she feared for her life, that she had been Vince Foster's secretary. She called it a so-called suicide. So apparently she has information we don't have, or doubts the suicide. And she said that there was a list of about 80 names of people that have died. Now, of course, the grand jurors heard it and it was like it went right over their heads. They didn't know, there was no understanding of what that was about. And there have been all of these individuals die in car accidents and plane accidents.
That's really frightening, and I've seen all the lists, and I don't know, the last time I saw it was 50, 60, 70 people, something like that, Chris. And some of those deaths are Jerry Parks is really, really questionable. This man was gunned down, at one of the nicest neighborhoods in Little Rock,
And the Little Rock police, I've spoken to them about it. They say that they're not even investigating.
The case is open, but there is no active investigation, and has been no active investigation on this case in a number of years.
Well, they had eyewitnesses, but
yes.
they didn't bother doing a police sketch of who the culprit.
Yeah, they have eyewitnesses, people that live next door to him. Excuse me. Was sitting right there in their vehicle, I mean, it's a main intersection. They slid up right in the middle of this intersection. This guy gets out, these guys get out, and they're shooting him, He's hit, 8, 9, 10 times, something like that, Chris?
Clinton now is in his 7th year. They're saying even the scandals have gone away. No one cares about the scandals. He's riding pretty high on the polls after all of this. Hillary Clinton, who even had to hide herself in the opening years after the healthcare fiasco and submerge herself. She is now emerging as a major force and as a potential Democratic candidate for the Senate in New York. Do you think she has a chance that she's actually going to run for that office?
Chris, I honestly don't believe she will run for the seat. First of all, I don't think Hillary can stand the pressure that the media and the scrutiny that they're going to put her under. I don't think she can stand that.
Well, you said you've noticed a different Hillary in recent years, that you almost can't...
I can't believe that they have... that they've been able to keep her quiet all this time. She's quite a tenacious lady, a bulldog, and I can't believe that she has been.
She always seems the model of control and circumspection.
That's not the Hillary that I know or that I remember, Chris. No, the Hillary that I know and that I remember is, like I said, very tenacious, a bulldog, the most driven woman I've ever been around in my life. And I can't believe that, like I said, that she's been quiet. And
wouldn't the Senate seat be a step down?
I think so. From First Lady,
well, co-president. I think it's pretty clear if you read between the lines in all of the Monica testimony that he certainly isn't making all the key decisions in running the country.
I think that's a good analogy. Co-president.
Well, he told us that we get 2 for the price of 1. Clinton was very open about that. Clinton, according to the Constitution of the United States, is barred from more than 2 terms. Do you think he really wants to leave office?
No. Bill Clinton likes the power. He likes being president. If he's out of that office, then all of these people that have all of this information, the floodgates are going to open. They're all going to come forward.
So both he and his wife have a dilemma.
Correct.
Because if he leaves office, he doesn't control the FBI and the IRS, and the agencies.
He doesn't have the power anymore. And with that power,
to go after people, to curry favor with the press, and So what does he do?
Chris, we've seen that. We saw it when he was governor of the state of Arkansas. We've seen it in his presidency. That any detractor of Bill Clinton's, the first thing they do is they go after him and they destroy him.
as an example for others.
That is right.
Well, what do you think what do you think's going through his mind now, and Hillary's mind, that they're approaching the end of their second term, the end of their time, that they constitutionally can hold office? Do you think he is, well, let me put it this way. It is a known fact that after Richard Nixon won landslide election in the early in the 1972 election, that he told senior aides, think of a way to get around the amendment that prohibits more than 2 terms. I want to stay in office for a 3rd term. Do you think Clinton's thinking about staying?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about that, Chris. This man, he's been a lifetime politician. A lifetime politician. He does not want to give it up.
Well, you hear wild things on the internet that there might be a national emergency, the Y2K incident. Clinton himself, his Secretary of Defense, said that it's inevitable that there will be a nuclear, biological, or chemical device that will explode in an American city. Do you think one or more of these events could be used as a pretext to keep power?
Certainly could. Certainly could. If it's a national emergency, then, he can. I hope that, that none of this ever,
Has anyone effectively stopped Clinton from all of his abusive powers from the days of Arkansas?
No. No one.
Do we see anyone in sight doing it?
No. No one.
What keeps you going through all of this? I mean, obviously you've been crucified by the press for becoming public. You ruined your career in some ways.
True.
You cut your income by losing this part-time position. The opportunity games. You could have had a great position in Bill Clinton's nest. You decided not to have that.
This is what keeps me going. And at some point in time, this man has to leave office. He has to relinquish that power. And when that happens, all of these people are going to come forward, and the floodgates will open, and people are going to say, all these people are going to say, I can't believe it. This man done that. Yeah, he done that. And he's doing that. And that is going to be the happiest day in my life.
But we're not so sure it's going to happen anytime soon.
It has to happen at some point in time, though, Chris. It has to happen, even if it's a national emergency or whatever.
Right. Someday he will no longer hold office as time as exists.
That is correct.
And we'll all look back and say, Larry Patterson, you did the right thing.
I did.
And we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And you have a good day.
Thanks, Chris.